To my YouTube listeners, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please subscribe. It'll make a big difference for the Chassidic Story Project. This is the Chassidic Story Project with Barak Hullman, podcasting from Jerusalem, Israel. This podcast is sponsored by listeners just like you. To become a supporter of this podcast, please go to HasidicStory.com, HASIDIC story.com. You'll never know, you'll never know, you'll never know, you'll never know. This is a story that I heard told many years ago by Reb Shlomo Carlebach. And normally I don't like to record stories that Reb Shlomo recorded, but since this is an unknown story, I figured I'd like to share it with you. When Reb Shlomo Rebbe became a Rebbe, he was ordained by the holy Apter Rav, the Ohev Yisrael, but he wanted to be ordained by the holy Kuzmer Rebbe. Now the Kuzmer Rebbe was the last close Chassid of the holy seer of Lublin, and everybody knows that of the Chassidic Rebbes, the seer of Lublin is one of the top Rebbes. And the Kuzmer, he wasn't just a big chassid of the Seir Lublin, he was also physically big. He stood at 6'4", or around 190 centimeters. And when he looked at you, it was so intense that he would give you the shivers. He was such a holy Jew. And so Reb Shlomo Rebbe, he decided to send one of his chassidim to Kuzmer and find out what's going on over there on Shabbos. And he says to his chassid, listen, when you go there, don't tell the Kuzmer Rebbe that you're from Radomsk, and don't tell him that you're one of my Chassidim. Just go. There's going to be thousands of people there. Just pretend to fit in with everyone else, and don't say that you're coming from me. So you know how it works. When you come for Shabbos, you have to kind of check in with the Rebbe, and everybody lines up and says hi to the Rebbe before Shabbos. And there's something like 2,000 people an hour passing by the Rebbe. And this Chassid, he passes quickly by the Kuzmer Rebbe, and the Kuzmer, he stops him. And he says, hey, stop for a second. Where are you from? Now the chassid's getting nervous because I'm telling you, thousands of people are going past the Rebbe, and the Rebbe's not stopping anyone, and he stops this chassid. So he can't lie. He says to the Rebbe, I'm from Radomsk. And the Kuzmer says, Radomsk? Tell me, who's your rabbi? And he says, Reb Shlomo. And the Kuzmer says, by any chance, is he also a Rebbe? And now the chassid, he wasn't supposed to say he's from Radomsk, and he's not supposed to say that he's a chassid of the Radomsker. So what is he supposed to do now? So he doesn't know what to say? And the Kuzmer Rebbe says to him, tell me, how much money does your Rebbe earn in a week? And the chassid says, 6 rubles. And the Kuzmer asks him, and tell me, how many children does your Rebbe have? And he says, 6 children, bli ayin hara? The Kuzmer says, 6 children and 6 rubles. Are any of his children engaged? And the chassid says, yes. He has a daughter that got engaged 2 weeks ago. And the Kuzmer asks, and how much is the dowry? The chassid says, 600 rubles. So the Kuzmer, he says, he makes 6 rubles a week. He has 6 children. 600 rubles for the dowry. Are you sure he's not a Rebbe? Are you sure he's not making money from answering questions and giving brachas from the kvitlach? And the chassid, he doesn't know what to say. So he just shrugged his shoulders and says, I don't know. The Kuzmer, he says, Gewalt. He makes 6 rubles a week. He has 6 children, 600 rubles for the wedding, and he's not a Rebbe? And then the Kuzmer starts laughing out loud. And the chassid, oy vey, this poor chassid, he's thinking, what did my Rebbe do to me? This Kuzmer Rebbe, he's nuts. He's just crazy. So after davening on Friday night, it's the same thing, davening ends, and everybody goes past the Rebbe, and the Kuzmer behaves like he's never met this chassid before. And he stops him and he says, hey, stop for a second. Where are you from? And he says, Radomsk. Who's your rabbi? Reb Shlomo? Are you sure he's not a Rebbe? How much money does he make a week? 6 rubles? And he has 6 children? Are any of his kids engaged? 600 rubles? Are you sure he's not a Rebbe? And then he laughs again. Wow, this chassid, he says to himself, this Kuzmer Rebbe, he's really out there. I mean, I've seen a lot of strange people, but nothing like this guy. And so he doesn't know what to make of this. And he thinks the Rebbe is senile, maybe crazy. He just doesn't understand. So on Shabbos day, he doesn't go past the Rebbe. As a matter of fact, he does everything to avoid the Rebbe. And after Havdalah, the Kuzmer asks the same thing. He stops the chassid, says, hey, where are you from? Radomsk. Who's your rabbi? Reb Shlomo. Are you sure he's not a Rebbe? How much money does he make a week? 6 rubles, 6 children. Are any of his children engaged? 600 rubles for the dowry. Are you sure he's not a Rebbe? And then he laughs out loud again. The Chassid, I'm telling you, is so confused he doesn't even know how to answer. And then the Kuzmer says to the Chassid, when are you going back to Radomsk? He says, I'm going back tomorrow morning. And now the Kuzmer grabs him by the collar and pulls him in really close. And the Kuzmer, being such a strong person, he pulled the Chassid right to his face. And he says to him, you listen well. Pay attention to what I'm about to tell you. You tell your Rebbe, Reb Shloimeh, that I remember when we were together with the seer of Lublin. Oh, that's it. The Chassid knew the Kuzmer was crazy because his Rebbe, Reb Shloimeh Radomsker, was only 4 years old when the seer of Lublin passed away. So he comes back to Radomsk, thinking this was a complete waste of his time. And he didn't want to say anything to his Rebbe because he didn't want to break his heart, telling him that the Kuzmer was senile. So he comes back and Reb Shloimeh is waiting on pins and needles. And he says to the Chassid, come and sit down and tell me everything that happened. And don't leave anything out. I want to hear every single detail, every word that the Kuzmer said. And the Chassid doesn't know what to do. So he says, okay, Rebbe, I'm going to tell you everything, and you make of it what you'll make of it. So he tells the Radomsker Rebbe everything about the 6 rubles. Is he a Rebbe? Are you sure he's not a Rebbe? He's going on. And Reb Shloimeh is sitting there with tears coming out of his eyes. Oy, the Kuzmer is so holy. Oy, is he holy? Gewalt, is he holy? And the Chassid said, Rebbe, I'm sorry to tell you, but the Kuzmer has lost it. He told me one more thing that I should tell you. He said he remembers being with you with the seer Lublin. Now, how could that be? You were only 4 years old when the seer Lublin passed away. But Reb Shloimeh, he jumps up. And he says, Gewalt, the Kuzmer, he has Ruach HaKodesh. He has a holy vision. Mamish, a holy vision. Reb Shloimeh says, when I was 3.5 years old, the granddaughter of the seer of Lublin got married. And it was the last wedding of the seer of Lublin in this world. Thousands and thousands of Chassidim were there. All of the big Rebbes were there. And of course you couldn't get into the hall. But after the wedding, thousands of people were standing in the street, holding torches, shouting, Mazel Tov, Heilige Rebbe, Mazel Tov. And the seer of Lublin comes out, and the Kuzmer, who was his right-hand man, and his closest chassid, was standing right next to the seer of Lublin. And I was on my father's shoulders, shouting, Heilige Rebbe, Rebbe over here. And the seer of Lublin, he comes out and he looks at everyone, and he looks every single person in the eye. And when the seer of Lublin looked at you, he was only looking at you. And then he looks at me, and he walks in a straight line right over to me on my father's shoulders. And he takes my little hand into his holy hand. And he says to my father, is this your son? And my father said, yes. And the seer of Lublin said to my father, take care of your Yingele. Take care of him. And I can still see the seer of Lublin holding my hand and talking with my father. Can you imagine? I was only 3.5 years old. There must have been 10,000 people or more there. And the holy Kuzmer Rebbe, he knows that I'm that little boy. He remembers that it was me. Gewalt, what an unbelievable Rebbe. And then he explains to the Chassid what those strange questions were. He says, the Kuzmer fixed my soul. He said, do you know, tzaddikim, they have to fix the 6th attribute, which is yesod, which is foundation. And so every time the Kuzmer said the word 6, he was fixing my soul. Everyone knows that depression comes from the 6th attribute if you don't fix it, which is why every time the Kuzmer Rebbe would ask you those questions and say 6 children, 6 rubles, 600 rubles, at the end he would laugh out loud because he was fixing the attribute of depression inside of me. And by fixing that, he gave me the ability to fix other people's souls. And he was actually, truly making me into a Rebbe. Even though I wasn't there, and even though he didn't see me, his holy vision knew exactly who I was. What Ruach HaKodesh. That is a true Rebbe. I've got one more short story for you, just because I love telling these. One day, the Baal Shem Tov once asked his closest chassid, Reb Nachum of Chernobyl, "Tell me what's so special about your Mincha prayer. I've seen you davening Mincha, and there's something very special about it. Tell me what's so special about your Mincha davening." And Reb Nachum tells the Baal Shem Tov, there's an interesting story connected to that. Said one time, I was traveling in a coach, driven by a non-Jewish wagon driver. And it was so cold and intense that the wagon driver actually died while he was driving. And I saw him fall over, so I had no choice but to jump up and grab the reins myself. And during the journey, I passed by a tavern in which a group of goyim were coming out. And they stumble out of the tavern, and they see me driving someone else's wagon, with the wagon driver dead in the front seat next to me. And they say, "Hey, a Jew is driving a dead wagon driver?" And they immediately decided that I had murdered the wagon driver. And no matter how much I tried to explain to him that he died of the cold, and it had nothing to do with me, and I'm just trying to get back home, they had a little trial for me, and they decided that I was going to be sentenced to death. So I said to them, "Please, before you kill me, let me have one last request. A few minutes of prayer to pray to my Creator." And so they said, "Okay, sure, you go, Jew, and you make your prayers to your Creator." And so I stepped aside, and I davened the Mincha davening like I'd never davened in my life before, pouring out my heart, begging Hashem, "Please, Hashem, you have to make a miracle and save me. I'm not ready to leave yet. I have more work to do in this world." And when I finished, I was completely exhausted, but I was ready to meet my fate, seeing that there was no hope and nothing was going to save me. And just as they were about to kill me, the dead driver got up from the seat and started explaining what had happened. He told the dumbfounded crowd in Russian that he had actually died from the cold and fell on the seat, and that this Jew had driven the wagon, and he didn't murder him at all. And when he was finished testifying about Reb Nachum, he fell down and was dead again. The group of peasants were so shocked by what they just saw, they freed Reb Nachum and didn't say another word. And it was this Mincha davening that made such an impression in heaven, Reb Nachum told the Baal Shem Tov. And so I learned, if I could daven like that when my life was about to end, I can daven like that when I'm still alive. And so every time I daven Mincha, I put my whole heart into it.